world's changing. And you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.
Aleksander Rakic winning a pretty clear unanimous decision win over Anthony Smith. A lot of different pieces here that involve both Smith and Rakic. BC, go first. Was this a statement win for Rakic at 205 pounds?
No, it was an impressive win, though, and it can be that without being a statement. It was well-rounded. He had some great success on the feet, some absolutely vicious leg strikes, and what he did to open the third round with his striking and punches was equally impressive, and then obviously the dominance on the ground. It wasn't a statement, though, Luke, for a couple reasons, and look, he took some heat for this, including from Justin Gaethje's Twitter account about his decision to more or less, I don't want to say lay and pray, especially in round two. He was actively looking to land strikes, but in that third round, he was very content to just control the fight on the ground. And I think the biggest misstep he made in this was the way in which he celebrated the victory with 7-8 seconds left. He got off the ground. He's already jumping up and down celebrating, and then lets out one of those screams. It's the kind of scream that tells you, I just did something spectacular. Here's the problem, though. In the interview afterwards, he says, I'm ready for a title shot right now. Not with that performance. That performance was a solid move up the ladder, let people know you're for real performance. But when you do not actively look to finish that, and you are content with getting to this level, with main eventing and showing people you can win, you did put a somewhat immediate ceiling on how quickly they will match you and the level of praise we will give you in this spot. I'm not going to damn him. A win is a win, and he dominated that fight, but he chose to play it a little bit safer than he probably needed to, because anytime they were on the feet together, he was chopping Smith down with those legs and really just beating him to the punch. This was a beaten man in Smith, and we can get to that in the future. Great win for Rakic, but you can't be talking about a title shot when you choose to end it in that fashion.
Yeah, and even Dominic Reyes was out there calling the main event lame. Although I missed it, what did Justin Gaethje say on Twitter about this?
He was basically saying the just bleed inside of him kind of wished Rakic ended up losing it for, in the second round, sort of making that active decision that he was content just controlling from the top without really, really pouring forward and going for the finish like we saw in round three.
Yeah, what's sort of frustrating about Rakic is that's not the performance that gives you an indication of his full ability or ceiling, or frankly, even his weaknesses either. It's the kind of middle-of-the-road performance that to beat a guy like Anthony Smith, you can only say good things about it, and it does mean a lot. The significance of it is there. In that sense, it's like kind of a statement, right? To be able to beat somebody that highly up the food chain and to do it without much of an issue, right? And so if I told you Rakic is going to win and he's not going to have much of an issue, if I told you that on Friday, you'd be like, okay, that's pretty great. And then when you see the particulars of it, you're like, okay, but maybe he could have gone into like greater effort. Maybe he could have done a few more tricks. I mean, here is basically the problem, and we'll get to a part of this when we talk about Neil Magny here in just a second. But the first part of the problem is Rakic only has 15 total fights. He was coming off of a loss. He had a camp in Croatia at this time. And with the whole COVID thing and everything else, I think he was just happy to get back in the win column. He was happy to get a win over Anthony Smith. And there's nothing really wrong with that. I think the part that you raised, which is, did you really wow anybody? Did you impress anybody? Did you really show us that your game had elevated to the next level? That part, to me, I didn't see the last one. In fact, the win over Manuel, while only 45 seconds or so, was certainly much more exciting by virtue of the imagination you got about him afterwards. Wow, what can this guy really do? This time you got the sense of like, okay, we kind of know his level, but we weren't really forced to reimagine the interesting possibilities of the development of his game, which is frustrating because he's young. I think he has the capacity to be exciting. He is huge for this weight class. If there was a UFC cruiserweight division, he would be a perfect candidate for it. He is, because I've been next to Anthony Smith several times. He's not a small fry. And Rakic looked to be just
you love yourself some Anthony
bigger.
Smith. We know this, Luke, okay? We know
Well, I'm just sort of pointing out, I love Rakic too. I was high on him a long time ago. And so to see the physical difference there was alarming. It's just that you just felt like, okay, you made it there in third, fourth gear. Is there a fifth gear? Can you find a fifth gear? And if you have one, what does it look like? So to me, it was I'll wrap up here very quickly, BC. I'll wrap up very fast, which is I appreciate what it means to beat someone like this coming off of a loss, first fight since the pandemic. You're still very young in your career. Fair enough. But if you really want to do something special in this division, it doesn't start when you get to the title. It has to happen before that. This was not per se special.
Yeah, and the end of your comment, the spirit of that I can agree with. I did want to counter two things. One, he beat Volkan Ozdemir. I know he got a split decision loss. I went back and watched that this morning. He won that fight. That was a step forward, and that's what each of his wins have been, a solid step forward. And one other thing you said was he didn't necessarily wow us by showing us the full game. I think he lacked the wow of going for the finish, but this was basically a showcase for 2+ rounds of how much his wrestling has evolved to mix with what you mentioned, really big size for this division. So again, from what we actually saw in the cage, the positives, I think he actually showed us more of his game. This wasn't that violent head kick of Manuel where you didn't learn a lot. I learned a lot about his 3-round stamina, at least, about his poise, about his well-roundedness. I just need, if you're going to act the part of a guy that says, look at me, give me the title shot, you got to start aiming toward the direction of what they look for in a title contender. You can keep winning. You're eventually going to run into a title shot. If you keep winning, you can go that route. But it's kind of like, I always go back to it, 1991, Western Conference Finals, Lakers win, they go to the finals, Sam Perkins celebrating in the locker room, he looks around, everybody's sitting there with a quiet face. Magic Johnson stands up, and he goes, we don't celebrate Western Conference championships on this team, all right? Save it to the end. I don't need you screaming into the microphone after you lay on a guy for 3 rounds, all right? Wait until you knock somebody out and you make a true statement that you're ready for the title.
So funny you said I was high on Smith because I'm always high on Smith. That's true. But I'll actually tell you why I disagree with you a little bit about Rakic. The reason why I got high on him was because of his UFC debut against Francimar Barroso. Now, I am not comparing Barroso's skill to Smith, but to me, this was what was frustrating. Rakic won that fight by taking him down and getting on top and using ground and pound, not in the totality of it, but in long stretches of that fight. And I was impressed at his physicality. I was impressed at his takedowns. I was impressed at everything it means to fight that kind of a strategy, which was, I believe, his UFC debut. I was like, whoa, who is this kid? So to me, when he does the exact same thing against Smith, yes, harder to do that. I want to see you up the ante a little bit. There wasn't hardly any guard passing. Granted, Smith is a black belt, but we're talking about progressing from 2017. There was some ground and pound, probably not enough. There just wasn't the kind of signals to me that there is the development in that portion of the game that there needs to be to really begin to put a stamp on a division. You can beat good guys, but, you know, the reason why the Ozdemir fight was even close was for probably some of the reasons why this one was boring, and that's the through line. There just wasn't enough stepping on it when you need to step on it, and that's frustrating given his tools. Now, it brings us to Anthony Smith, BC, which is he was having all kinds of interesting comments afterwards, maybe switching back to middleweight, which I know was a horrible cut for him. He was talking about how strong Rakic is. This is 2 losses in a row now. What's next for Anthony Smith?
I think the best answer here to not sound too reactive, right? Because from what you saw on there, like, he's too young to talk about retirement or walking away, but he's clearly not going in the right direction. He's absorbed some heavy beatings in both wins and losses, and I think he's fighting too quickly of late as well. Luke, the best thing I could say is take a break. Take a long, extended break, re-examine in camp, in your training camp, in your strategies, in everything about your game, what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. I could sit here and look back at his resume and pick apart very critically and say he sort of arrived as a potential light heavyweight title challenger at a time when there really weren't a lot of names to pick from. He said, he bounced back from that knockout loss to Maheda, rebuilt himself with 3 wins, against Ozdemir, against my buddy Rashad, against Wash Shogun Hua, okay. But I'm going to keep him that credit. He went 5 hard rounds with John Jones, and he didn't take that lazy way out backdoor DQ win to win the title, and I still respect him for that. I don't think he was all you thought he was, but I certainly don't think he's done. I do think he needs a longer look at what's happening, Luke, because you're going to become the Cowboy Cerrone of 205, and I mean late career Cowboy Cerrone pretty soon if you keep just going back in there and just say, all right, let's roll the dice again and let's see what happens.
Right. Well, I mean, the question is, what did I think he was? And what I think he was disrespected. Right now, I think he is compounding the problems that he had in any weight class with just ill-advised fights, to your point, taking too soon. But when he had beaten late career Rashad, late career Shogun. Those are nice wins, but they don't tell you much. Well, then he fights Oezdemir and finished him from the back, which, by the way, no one expected him to do. Certainly the odds makers did not think he was going to. Had the fight against John Jones, didn't go his way. Okay, no harm, no foul. And then he goes and turns right around and then submits Alexander Gustafsson and retires him by choking him from the back. At that point, I felt like Anthony Smith was finally getting the respect that he deserved. Folks were saying he was not very good all the way up until that point. And to me, it was like, I don't know what y'all are looking at. He clearly is very, very talented. The problem is he then has 2 good rounds against Teixeira and then takes an absolutely epic beating that he did not need to. I actually interviewed him before this fight, and I was like, how are you feeling physically? He's like, yeah, great. I had the teeth replaced, blah, blah, blah. Like, he was treating it like it was very routine, and he is certainly very, very tough, but I just did not like the easiness with which he was treating some pretty substantive injuries. And I'm not saying it's a bad psychological beating, but that's going to be one that's going to take maybe a little bit more time than normal to get over. And now he's lost 3 of his last 4. That's the problem to me. It's excusable in and of their own rights to lose to Teixeira, especially if you had a good showing early, or John Jones. This was one that you shouldn't have taken, I think, this quickly. This was one that should have been a little bit more thought out. This was one that should have been happening towards the end of the year, if not early first quarter of 2021. So what's next for him? I actually do not recommend a drop down to middleweight. That every story he's ever told about how hard and difficult and nasty it was, that's not the retreat position. Now, maybe if there's some kind of crazy mad scientist, nutritionist out there who can find a way to get it done without those things, okay, that's an opportunity to explore. But middleweight has gotten young and interesting and difficult seemingly overnight. And now at light heavyweight, this is a place he already occupies at a relatively high spot. I think your advice is right on. Take a break. Do not rush back. Train. Work on your craft. Everything else that you need to. Find whatever positions in this fight you didn't think went your way. Work on them. And then come back first, maybe second quarter of 2021. And then let's see what the situation is there. He's not close to a title shot anyway. There's no reason to be a 4 of your last 5 fights losing kind of guy. Reset. And then from there, you can make some evaluations.
Luke,
all right, which takes us now.
Can I jump in? No. Can I? You don't have a job to get to. I can stiff on Jay.
Jay is losing his shit behind the scenes here, just so you know.
Can I ask you a difficult question? And nobody likes
Please.
being asked these kind of questions about their family. And look, you've identified you're an Anthony Smith guy. I'm a Joanna guy. All right. So here's the deal, Luke. I'm not going to sit here and say, your wife's a real nice lady, but you can't cook. The 2 Anthony Smith wins that you're banking on that tell you he's a legitimate 205-pound title contender are Volkan Oezdemir and Alexander Gustafsson. True or false, if you're going to be hypercritical, it's not his fault, but haven't those wins aged not so well based on the performances of both guys in the aftermath that maybe, just maybe, we were wrong to believe he's this guy? He may have intangibles of toughness that carried him up to that level, but he might not actually be that guy.
He submitted them both from the back. That's not toughness, BC.
I know, but I'm basically asking you, does the fact that both of those wins don't look as good now as they did then, does that change anything?
I think certainly you could say certain resumes age better than others. Connor's has aged really well. I still think those wins were valuable based on who he was beating in the ranked positions at those times. But to your point, Gustafsson's certainly fallen on hard times, retired after that one, and then came back and looked terrible against Fabricio Verdum. And certainly Oezdemir has had his fair share of challenges to that point. You could argue, as you mentioned, that he had lost to Rakic rather than defeated him. Okay, sure. There's no denying that those are not... They don't carry the same shine and luster they did at the time he got them. I'm perfectly willing to admit that. But are those wins over top 10 guys at light heavyweight at virtually in any way you want to slice it? Yes, of course they are. The point about Smith was not that he was the next coming of Christ. The point is everyone said he was a terrible middleweight who went up to light heavyweight and just got lucky. No, he didn't. No, that's not true. He had those 2 wins over, as we mentioned, Rashad and Shogun, and those are, those are great to build your name and your visibility, but they don't really tell us hardly anything. The other ones, while they don't carry the same lasting significance, they absolutely did tell us he belongs. And I think that's the only thing I've been asking people to accept. He is a very high level.
Gold, though. May have been fool's gold.
No,
I got shirts that
those
make
are
me look
not
like
fraudulent.
I've been in the gym, Luke. Okay, I got the
Those are not
the t-shirts cut the right way, okay? It's fool's gold.
Those are not fraudulent wins. That they don't mean the same thing that we thought that they might have. Certainly is an argument you could make, and I wouldn't really dispute it too strongly. That they are worthless or that they really don't mean anything in the end is total overreaction. This is what I mean, dude. There's this constant desire to rob Smith of credibility, and I don't really understand it. Look at the losses that he has and use that. You don't need anything else to make the argument. They're perfectly fine on their own, and some of his, I think, bad decision-making and taking this fight too early. Everything else, to me,
very fair,
counts in his favor. Okay.
You're very fair response, Luke. A difficult question, fair response. I'll give you that.
Are you in?
This is our time. The world's changed, and you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.